Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film Mechanic Screenwriting Podcast today. And I have a very special guest. This is the last guest of this season, the prominent. Wait, hold on. I always want to just like start talking about people and how and get excited. I get excited when I start talking about them. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I want Brandon Tamburri to introduce himself and tell us who he is and things like that. Go ahead,
Well,
Brandon.
first off, thank Hey, how you doing? First off, just thanks for having me on. I appreciate the little intro. So just to tell the listeners now a little bit about myself, my name is Brandon Tamburri. I am a filmmaker as well as a screenwriter. I have a new film called Plan B that I co-wrote, I directed, and I produced. It's going to be coming out on September 27th, available on video on demand, all digital platforms like Apple and Amazon, and pretty much anywhere else you could buy or rent movies. And yeah, I've now finished my first feature that I've wrote and directed, and hoping to make some more.
So, listen, Brandon, I know the process of writing a feature film and then getting it picked up and all of that wonderful, good, fun stuff. But this is not just like a independent film with like your friends and your homies. This is a film with some heavy names in it. Tell us about how that process. I want you to talk about the names of the individuals because I feel like coming from you, I want you to talk about how you develop those relationships to get these individuals involved and what was that process like?
So yeah, first just to go over the cast of the film, it stars Jamie Lee, who is in HBO's Crashing, John Heater from Napoleon Dynamite, and a bunch of other things. And then we have supporting roles from Oscar-nominated Tom Berenger, Shannon Elizabeth from the American Pie franchise, Kate Flannery, who plays Meredith from The Office. Really just a super fun cast. And to be honest, I did not really have relationships with any of them prior to doing this. So I think this is a good message for all of the screenwriters out there and aspiring screenwriters is that if you continue really just to work and develop your script and get it to a quality that gets people excited, cast are going to be attracted to it. Because I honestly had no relationships with any of these actors, but they all just read the script and really responded positively to it and wanted to come on.
So you do have one person that I was like Tom Berenger. I was like, oh, okay, okay. You got Jamie Lee. Okay, I see you. But then I see Vernon Davis. Okay, how did that come about?
So Vernon Davis was awesome to work with, and just to give the listeners a little context, he is an actor. Also, a bunch of other stuff he does. Really does so many different things. But most people know Vernon from being a Pro Bowl NFL player, Super Bowl champion with the Denver Broncos. Mainly played on the 49ers. So in the script, there's this character who is a pregnancy coach and pretty much a pregnancy coach. Like he teaches a Lamaze class. And I always thought, what funnier character for this role than someone who is like this big, handsome, muscular guy, just like this big, intimidating guy teaching a bunch of pregnant women how to breathe. And I always just thought it would be hilarious if it was played by either a former professional athlete or professional wrestler or something like that. And as we were getting closer to filming, my producer on the film, who produced the film alongside myself, his name is DJ Dodd. He told me that he recently worked on a movie with Vernon Davis, and he said Vernon could potentially do this role. What do you think? And I said, yeah, I love Vernon. That would be awesome. DJ called him up, and Vernon came on board and showed up the set and was hilarious in the movie. He doesn't typically do a ton of comedy, but he's very funny and awesome to work with.
So you have a comedy. Now, this is the thing. You told us a little bit about like it's coming out. You told us a little bit about the cast, but what is the film about actually?
So, just to give I'll say like a very brief synopsis of this. So, the movie's called Plan B, and it's about this woman, early 30s, doesn't really have her life together. One night she goes out, she has a little bit too much to drink, and she drunkenly sleeps with this awkward guy who lives in her apartment building. And the awkward guy is played by John Heater. The main character is played by Jamie Lee. And from this one night stand, she ends up winds up pregnant. And I'll say after that, after she winds up pregnant, she goes to tell this guy, played by John Heater, about the pregnancy, and she just realizes how unfit this guy is to be a father. So she decides she's going to not only keep the pregnancy a secret from him, but she's going to then try to quickly find a more successful guy that she can then quickly sleep with and tell this new guy that he's the father. And that kind of sets up, I'll say, a series of failed but funny attempts at her trying to find a match. Then she meets this guy who seems perfect. He checks all the boxes. He's totally on board for the pregnancy, of course, thinking the baby is his. And then the more real things get with this guy, the worse our protagonist starts to feel. Her morals really start to kick in, and she just realizes that she might be making the biggest mistake of her life. And that's honestly where the heart of the story is right there, because again, we might have had some what you call like heavy hitter cast, but at the same time this was an independent film. We didn't have tons of money, so I really had to focus on really the emotional elements, a lot of the character driven moments.
It like after watching like the trailer about 3 or 4 times, it's the perfect setup. It actually is the perfect setup. Drunken, comes home, sleeps with the guy across the hall, gets pregnant, finds a rich guy to to be the father, right? It's a rom-com, correct?
I'd say it leans more on the comedy side than a traditional rom-com. Like some people now, you'll see like a Hallmark movie and they'll call that a rom-com. It's not really like that at all. It's more closer to it's a rated R comedy is what I'll say.
So where did the idea of the film come from?
So back when I was in college, I had like a friend who kind of tossed the idea around to me of like a pregnancy movie, and I was like, oh yeah, that sounds kind of interesting. Like pregnancy is just such a relatable theme and universal theme that so many different people can relate to. And then nothing ever really came of it. And then as I got a little bit older, like into my mid 20s, really even early 20s, I had a few different friends who kind of were dealing with pregnancies. One person in particular, it was like an unwanted, not unwanted, but unexpected pregnancy. And kind of just seeing that person, all these other pregnant people in my life, like how they dealt with kind of the, I'll say, seriousness of being pregnant and how scary it can be. I was just thinking, like, how can I make this funny? And to me, that's where a lot of the best comedy comes from when you take these serious moments and try to just put a comedic twist on them.
I want you to, if you can, talk about like once you decided to do the script, what was the process to bringing it like to fruition, like getting it in the hands of a producer, finding the money, like the the contractual components of it. How did that process go?
Yeah, so I can definitely talk about that more. And every process for a script is different. I think what I did for this is going to probably be different from a lot of the other guests you've had on and other screenwriters. But pretty much, I was developing this script over the course of years. I think I started writing the first draft in like 2018. Now it's 2024. So I really probably took me almost a year to get like a first draft done. And then over the next like probably 2+ years, I was just in my free time, maybe every couple of months I'd revisit it, but I wasn't really sending it around to any producers. I wasn't a produced writer, so no one was really aware of this project. And I was working for a production company at that time. I wasn't really in a writing position or anything like that. I was more of like a creative development executive at this bigger production company. And at that point, I think I was 25. And I just figured, like, you know what? Like, if I'm ever going to try to make this movie and like really focus on it, figured I would spend all of the time I was spending at work on my day job and just kind of quit, leave that company, and just focus all that time on trying to make this film and make it happen. And it took me quite some time, but at this point, it's like 4 years later, the movie is finally coming out. And I will say the movie's actually been completely finished for over a year at this point. So it's kind of been a long road of just kind of trying to sell the finished film and find a distributor. But to kind of tie back into where your question was, so at that point, I had the script. I had some contacts in the industry. Like I mentioned, I was working at a production company before, so I did have some relationships with producers and different people working in the industry, as well as some people who had some experiences investing in movies. And really, like I'd say I just kind of started reaching out to people and seeing if anyone was interested in putting money into this thing. I put together a pitch deck, which really was like a creative outline of the movie as well as a business plan. So I had this entire business plan that I thought of how we were going to shoot the whole movie independently. I was going to direct it. I was going to produce it. We were going to then at that point, once we raised all the money, we would start casting the movie, and then we'd film it and bring it to a film festival and sell it to a distributor. So that really was my plan. And again, it took much longer than I anticipated, and it didn't go as smoothly as I initially mapped out. But at the same time, I am here right now with a finished movie.
So once you raised the money, was it mainly you spending your money, or did you have a team that helped you raise the money?
So I didn't really put my own money in. I would if I had the money, I totally would have just financed the whole thing. But I ended up really just grinding, talking to people, and this, for all the listeners out there, I didn't necessarily have any like big film financier kind of investor or studio. I have at this point over 30 investors in the movie, and a lot of those investors put in what seems like a lot of money, but at the end of the day, like $5,000, $10,000, that's where most of this money to make this movie came from. I really was just reaching out to friends, friends of friends, people like that. And my background before this, like I did go to school for film, but also business. So my major was business. I had a minor in film. So most of my friends are people who have pretty good business jobs and make decent salaries. So I kind of just started off asking some friends, like, hey, any interest in investing in a movie? And again, this was like kind of peak pandemic where no one was really going out and doing anything. So a lot of people had some leftover just spending money looking for alternative investments. That was like a popular term back then in like 2021, 2022. So I kind of just had good timing for it, got a bunch of friends to throw in five or $10,000 each. And then at that point, a lot of these friends were introducing me to their other friends, like, hey, this seems really cool. You want to talk to my other friend? And then once I got to the point of having like enough money to be taken a little bit seriously, I kind of circled back to some of those contacts I had from my previous job and got maybe like two or three people who had some experience investing in movies before. But again, it wasn't like anyone came in and funded the entire movie. It really was over 30 investors, which was great because it gave me a lot of that control, which I think is important for an independent movie to really have one person really spearheading the ship. I didn't have a studio forcing me to do anything or forcing me to cast certain actors. I was able really just to do whatever I thought was best for the film and also what I thought was best for the investors because that is definitely important as well.
That's key. Doing what's best for the investors because they do want their money back. You know, at the end of the day, no one. We love to sit down and shoot the gifts with you. We love to sit down. We love, but I want to say, a lot of times people, and I always say this, people don't invest in films. They invest in people, right? It's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of individuals who are screenwriters because they feel like once they write this film, they're going to shop the film and people are going to invest in the film. That's not how it works. It's people investing in people. That means that's trust, that's faith, that's respect, that's business mindedness. They're able to see some qualities within the person to say, hey, this person is a good person and I feel like my return on the investment will be what they say it is. So I will share what I have, my resources with them. And upon you giving resources, you mentioned DJ Dodd. How did DJ Dodd play an important role in the making of Plan B?
So I was definitely the one in charge of all of the raising money and everything like that. Like I raised every penny myself from all of these different 30 plus investors. Once we actually were fully funded, I was trying to cast the film myself. And to be honest, a lot of these agents and managers just weren't really taking me seriously. I did have some credits that you could look up. I worked on some other projects, But at the same time, I would call an agent and they'd be like, "Oh, sounds like a great concept. Who's directing?" And I would say, "I am." Like, who wrote the script? I would say I did. And it kind of just reeked of like a an amateur film. So at that point, I was like, all right, I need to reach out to a producer. DJ was somebody that I really didn't have any connection with him originally, but as I was trying to raise money, he was someone that I reached out to. I kind of just saw that he was kind of from the same area that I was, and I reached out to him on LinkedIn. And we ended up connecting, and he really liked the script and was super supportive of it. And I kind of just kept him posted over like a year or so as I was trying to raise money. And then once I had the money and I was struggling to cast, I knew that he had relationships with agents and was someone who was way more comfortable talking to agents and also negotiating contracts than I was. And I also wanted to focus on actually directing the movie. So I ended up bringing DJ on board and he was great. I think, or not I think, without DJ, we definitely wouldn't have gotten some of the cast that we did.
I like the fact that it's hard to trust people in this industry from DJ Dod's position or your position. It's hard to, those organic relationships take a long time, a lot of times, right? And for you to establish that organic relationship over time, over a year of just updating him. Hey, this is where I am. This is what's going on. Hey, not harassing him, not barraging him with emails like, can you help me? 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 But like, I feel like, what y'all did was kind of organic. And by him coming on, what the project that you have right now is the project that it's intended to be, right? And in that process, I know you have a co-writer that kind of helped you on this project. And that person is,
So yeah, that is my friend Gene, who really is just like a an old friend of mine who doesn't really have any connection to the industry outside of me. Went to college together, kind of originally wrote the script back in 2018, and then I kind of took it from there. I did a bunch of kind of rewrites on my own, but yeah, we co-wrote the script originally together back in 2018, and then
did y'all have any did you feel any tension in the beginning? Like, come on, Gene, we can do it
no,
together.
I'd say not really, because back at this point again, this was so long ago that I think for a little bit we thought maybe we could both end up working in the film industry, and then I think Gene just realized like the reality of what trying to make it as a screenwriter is and how much grinding it is, and just wasn't really cut out for it. Like, look, I'm happy we wrote this script together. Like maybe we'll write something else, but like I'm not gonna continue to grind and write stuff for free for most of my life and probably not get anything made. So I was like, yeah, okay, I understand that.
And
But yeah,
which
we're actually writing with someone else I always think is fun just because you have someone else to bounce ideas off of, and as long as your writing partner is a good collaborator and you both kind of both are like-minded and want the same thing, then it should make the project better.
so when you and Gene were writing this story, did what changed from the very first draft?
So that's a great question. I would say overall, like the concept is there. A lot of the story elements and the beats are quite different. So I when I was explaining the plot, I kind of said that once this character, her name is Piper, kind of goes in this scheme and starts dating this new guy, she eventually just starts to feel really bad. And that's kind of what I mentioned is the heart of the story. In the original draft, she didn't necessarily feel bad about it. And what the issue was there is a lot of people would read the script and they're like, yeah, I don't like the movie ends and I don't really want this character to do good. I don't want to root for them. So that was something I really struggled with in the future draft that I was mainly working on myself. Like, okay, how can I make this horrible thing that this girl is doing not seem that bad? And to me, it was she needed to feel bad about it. Like she needed to feel guilty every step of the way. So I might give a little bit of spoilers about the movie in this little run up right here, but she essentially starts dating this handsome, successful businessman, and it's going great. She's like, wow, my plan worked. I'm set. And then she ends up telling him that she's pregnant. And she eventually sees how excited he is to be a father. And she kind of, for the first time in this whole scheme, is just really hit with a lot of remorse. She's like, wow, like this actually seems like I'm doing something bad. It was the first time she realized in this whole scheme that it wasn't that like she was thinking about someone other than herself. And that's something that was not in the original first draft. And then what also kind of transpires is she ends up kind of meeting the other people in his life, meeting his parents. His dad is Tom Berenger. And she sees like how excited his family is about this. And she kind of realizes, like, wow, I thought I was just kind of bringing this guy into it. And now I realize he's got a whole life too. And all of them are going to be part of this as well. Um, and all of those kind of beats were there, but really just I'd say the emotional elements of our protagonists were all like different. Like she had totally different motivations, and there's a much better payoff in this final version of the story. And there's some other changes as well, between characters and certain scenes and things like that. But for the most part, concept is the same, but a lot of like the dialogue and different emotional beats have certainly adapted over the years.
What was it like to get a distribution deal for Plan B? And the reason why I'm asking this question because I want to kind of guide you somewhere. A lot of times, what happens is when screenwriters think of their films, they don't think of the end result. Is that something that you had in mind? I mean, I know initially you said from a business standpoint you had it in mind, but why did it take so long to get a distribution deal?
So we right now it's September 2024. We filmed the movie like 2 years ago at this point. It was the summer of 2022. So we ended up going through post production, and the movie was totally finished August of 2023. So at this point, it's taken 13 months from the movie actually being finished to the actual release date, which is a pretty long time if you ask me. So part of what that process was, like I mentioned, this was a totally independent production. So we had no studio, we had no sales agent or anything like that. So the movie was done in August. We ended up at AFM, which happens in November. We got a sales agent who was Premier Entertainment Group. We didn't actually go, but we kind of used that as our timeline. We're like, all right, it's after Labor Day. We're going to start reaching out to some sales agents. And again, we had a finished movie. It was featured in Deadline. So, like, there was some press about it, and there were quite a few sales agents and distributors who actually reached out to us after hearing about the movie, which was great. Um, I also had some contacts. DJ had some contacts. We have another producer I didn't really mention yet named Erica who had some contacts as well. Her name's Erica Hampson. And at that point, we started just reaching out to all of the sales agents. We got some offers, and we ended up going with Premier Entertainment Group at AFM. They announced the deal. And then once they came on board, they made a trailer, they made a poster, and it wasn't something that happened overnight, but pretty much they had to get all of their marketing materials ready. Then, of course, like with the timing of it all, there was Thanksgiving and all of the holidays. So by the time they actually were ready to really pitch this movie to buyers and things like that, it's like the middle of January 2024. Just because, again, we partnered with them in like November, then the holidays. So it's like January at this point. And Premiere, they go to all these different film markets, and the next one up that they considered a major market was Berlin. They met with a bunch of buyers there, pretty much like show the trailer, show the poster, then follow up with an actual screener. They ended up getting a few offers. Quiver, who ended up purchasing the film, and they're the ones releasing it in the U.S. Um, they ended up kind of, I guess, having an initial conversation there, and they didn't actually close the deal until Cannes, which was like 2 months later. So that whole process of Quiver actually buying the film took a little bit. And then there's the whole delivery process as well, which a lot of filmmakers and screenwriters don't really think of. But when you sell an independent film, it's not as easy as just like emailing somebody a link. You are actually delivering all of the technical deliverables, which is a bunch of different exports of the video files. Then you're sending a bunch of sound files. At this point, pretty much everyone requires a 5.1 sound mix, which is something that I definitely recommend telling your sound designer and whoever doing your post audio before they start. But all these technical deliverables, and then like thousands of documents, pretty much every single contract you've had for the whole film, whether it be an actor agreement, a crew agreement, location agreement, you need to deliver all of this to the distributor. So in my case, I had to deliver all of it to our sales agent, Premier, and then Premier was responsible for delivering it to Quiver as well as all of the different international distributors because they did sell the movie in foreign territories as well. So Plan B will be coming out in other countries, which is also super exciting.
As a writer, one of the things I want to ask about, and I think this is more or less for a question for you and not so much as about the film. I think the question I want to ask is mentally, how did you stick to what was your stick to itness? Like, what was the mental capacity to see it all the way through? After the nose, after the nose, after all of the nose, what was it about Brandon Tamburri that said, I can actually do this?
Well, that's a great question. I'll be honest. There was definitely a lot of nights early on in this process where I considered giving up. It really took, I mentioned I started writing the script in 2018. It's now 2024. So this is several years. In the beginning of 2021, so at this point, it's still been over 3 years. I really like left my former position working at a production company and really set off trying to raise money. And I really was working on this full time back then. And I had enough money saved up, luckily, for my past work that I was able really just to survive off of savings. And then, really, like through the entire year of 2021, was just fundraising. Beginning of 2022 was around like the holidays, and I still did not have enough money to make the film. And at that moment is when I was thinking like, all right, I'm going to give myself like 3 months. If I don't have like at least like a start date for the movie within these 3 months, I'm gonna, not that I would give up, but I would have totally changed the direction of where I was going to try to take the movie. Over that year in 2021, when I was trying to find financing, I did have several meetings with producers who really liked the script and were interested in optioning the script, but they didn't necessarily want to make this independent version with me directing. They're like, well, maybe get a big name director and try to get some bigger actors and make like a big several $1 million version of this movie, which in theory sounded great, but I've heard horror stories of writers optioning their scripts and then they never see the light of day. So I figured I would just see it out for that reason. And then thankfully, in those 3 months I gave myself, I ended up getting the rest of the financing. And I think part of it was just like I really knew it was game time. I had a lot of it raised. I made some budget cuts. Like when I first set off to make this, the movie, I wanted to make a much bigger, still an independent, lower budget, relatively movie. But what I ended up getting was about like half of that money. And I ended up having to really scale the script down a little bit and also just make a bunch of cuts in terms of production. And I was like, this is the lowest I think I can make it for and still make a professional movie with actors that I think everyone will be really excited about. And then at that point, once we actually got the financing and were filming the movie, there still were a lot of hiccups, but I knew at that point I needed to see it out just because once you raise money from people, the way I look, I think I heard Mark Cuban say this actually before. I'm a big fan of his. He's like, when you get money from an investor, it's not a victory, it's an obligation. Like you need to pay these people back. So once someone gives you even a dollar, it becomes your responsibility. So I definitely lost a lot of sleep at night thinking that I had people's money tied up and again, they're not necessarily only investing in the project, they're investing in you. And for me, a lot of friends I had invested in this movie. So again, it's not like there was one huge financier that could lose millions of dollars, but to me, if I have a friend who could potentially lose $5,000, it's not really a great feeling. So it really was important for me to try to make not only the best movie possible, but a movie that could potentially be profitable in this kind of crazy landscape that is the film industry nowadays. Something else I'll say, not only to you, but to the listeners out there, we're producing a podcast called the Joke Zero podcast, which really is meant to be like behind the scenes of independent filmmaking. And the first season, which is coming out later this month, is really focused specifically on Plan B. So every episode has a different cast member or crew member on the podcast and really just talks about their experiences, how they got started in the entertainment and film industry, what it was like working on other projects, what it was like working on Plan B, how they got involved. It's hosted by Anna Roisman, who's a great comedian, and I'm on every episode as well, just as the kind of producer. And we have some great conversations on there, and that's going to be coming out later this month as well. And again, just some really cool behind the scenes stories, not only on Plan B, but on some other projects as well. You could hear from like John Heater and Vernon Davis and some of the other cast members.
Oh man, we appreciate it. Where can we find you at? Where can we find you at, Brandon?
So I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can follow me at Brandon Tamburri, BrandonTamburri. I'm that on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook, really pretty much anywhere. I'm on LinkedIn. And then my company is called Joke Zero, which is Joke Zero Comedy, at Joke Zero Comedy on Instagram, Twitter, really at anywhere. And I'm hoping to continue to build up the Joke Zero brand over future movies to come.
Well, everyone, make sure you get an opportunity to tune in to Plan B that will be dropping September 27th, as well as make sure you get an opportunity to tune in to Joke Zero podcast. Brandon is doing phenomenal things right now. I appreciate him for taking the opportunity and blessing us with his presence and giving us a really great film. So thank you for everyone for tuning in to the Film Mechanic Screenwriting Podcast. Don't forget to stop by www.dairytight.com, pick up a copy of the Film Mechanic Screenwriting Workbook, and see you next time.